All right, everyone. I am actually a fan of prison reform for the United States because having several million people incarcerated doesn't make a whole lot of sense. When the proportion of people in your society that are in prison is higher than China, you know that there's a problem. Mainly it's due to the drug war. A lot of people, what happens is several minor offenses get rolled up, like you have a three strikes law in some states and things like that, and people end up getting put away for a long time for what ultimately is a fairly minor offense. The idea of being tough on crime, stopping crime, hasn't actually panned out, and we've been trying it for several decades now, and largely it's been a failure, just like the drug war itself. My idea is that we should end the drug war completely, decriminalize all substances so that mere possession isn't a crime at all. Get rid of all three strikes and mandatory sentencing laws for anything that's not violent or a high grade felony. Reduce sentencing generally for anything else that applies. What we should do is we should up the sentence for the most severe crimes and pretty much say fuck it with everything else. We'd have a more polite society, I think. Why don't we focus on getting murderers and rapists off the street and then, leave the weed head over there alone? Somebody shoplifted. Oh my God. Well, fucking then let the store enable restitution. The store can use them for cheap labor for a couple hours or something. Why don't you do that? Keep them keep them out of the county jail. Clear out the county jail. Keep the drunk tank basically, and do away with the concept of mass incarceration. It was funny though. AOC actually has come out and said something it shows that she has halfway intelligent thinking skills when she wants to, I suppose, on this issue, saying part of it was a little hyperbolic. People are trying to cast it as though she was saying we should abolish prisons. That was just part of a thematic sort of representation to what she's talking about. She's talking about as ending mass incarceration. We wouldn't need nearly as many prisons in the country. Certainly the for-profit prison system would be largely unnecessary. The state likes to use that as slave labor to make like license plates and road signs and shit, especially some of the western states. I think that's barbaric. I think that that'll eventually be seen like penal colonies the way we see them now. We'll send you off to Devil's Island for the next 10 years, because you stole a loaf of bread. That sort of trope is common within movies. It's mocked. It's seen as periodic. It's seen as amusing or, in some cases, frightening, specifically because it's dated. The fact that it is so outdated and brutish is why it's interesting to us. 100 years from now, much of what we do today, whether it's criminal justice, prisons, and stuff like that, or anything in society, will be the same. Our science will be seen the same way as electroshock therapy and ice baths in some tuberculosis ward 100 years ago. We have to be willing to admit that. That being said, the idea of the abolition of for-profit prisons I support, by and large. There shouldn't be a financial motive in imprisoning people. Because the idea is that just, what you do is you create a situation where politicians getting money from middlemen through the prison system are encouraged to make more things illegal. I would pair this, though, with a lot of other things. Number one, and I'm against the death sentence, which usually means a life sentence anyway, let's face it, because of constant appeals. It takes like 10, 15 years to kill someone when they get the death sentence anyway. Fuck it, just give them life in prison. We should have a handful of very high security prisons, which would not be happy places to be for people who kill and rape and stuff like that. A jail/rehab system for pretty much everything else, where people can be incarcerated for short periods. You wouldn't have stacking sentences, like the idea that you shoplifted, you got overnight in jail, and then the next time you do it, we're putting you in for a month. And if you do it again, we're putting you in a maximum security facility for 10 years. That's dumb. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's not going to actually help rehabilitate a person. The person's not... You think that someone who shoplifted or got caught with a couple of tabs of acid is necessarily a degenerated, corrupted human being who needs, basically the modern day shock treatment. I disagree. I think that if there's any legitimate crime at all, obviously you have to guard property, so simple theft and things like that have to be punished in some way. You would want to try to prevent that from happening through rehabilitation. Well, that's not what a maximum security facility is geared towards. That's where you put people who can't be out on the streets. If the state's not allowed to execute them, you have to segregate them off somewhere because they've shown they're incapable of functioning in society. In some cases, these people are nuts. Let's change the criteria for declaring someone a fucking psychotic and then expand the hospital system too. Basically, somebody who's an incurable maniac whose proclivity is to kill and maim and rape, no, they can't be out on the streets. Well, I'm not sure that putting them in a 7x8 cell when it's ultimately not their fault, they're fucking totally psychotic, that sort of applies. Anyway, our prison system does need deep reform. It's also expensive. You know how much tax money we pay on that shit? Oh, it makes profit for the state. It certainly makes profit for politicians and a few corporate CEOs that run these systems. For everyone else, there's tax money. Our tax money pays to incarcerate other people, often for little or nothing. We could probably let half the prison population in this country go without upping the crime rate simply because the people are not lifelong criminals. You know, they did something stupid, 10 years ago. Or a 3 strikes law got them for something that shouldn't even be like more than 10 days in jail. Or they've been framed. In some cases, they're not even guilty. We should revisit all the old cases. The monumental effort that it would take to do that would be severe. Yeah, keep in mind this. Under like 3 strikes law and things like that. Imagine that somebody, they are guilty of simple assault 7 years ago and maybe, they stole some gum, so that was strike 2. And then they get wrongfully convicted for a very simple crime and still end up in prison for 20 years. What kind of future is that? What you've taught them is that society is unfair and blind. You haven't taught them not to break the law. If anything, guidelines like that teach people how to evade the law, not how to not break it. The law is out of step with reality in many ways. Until that changes, you're not going to be able to change any of these other societal problems. You've taught people that government is deaf, dumb, and blind, and as an extension of that, so is the so-called justice system. And it is, by and large. It's deaf, dumb, and blind. It's run by bureaucrats, which isn't the way that it's supposed to be run. It's overly burdensome. An average individual could never even fathom a single category within law, let alone the legal system, the penal system itself. This room, you'd have to stack it from floor to ceiling with books in order to contain all the volumes of law that you would have to memorize, essentially, in order to understand the legal system and your own existence within it. It doesn't really make sense. Simplify it massively, kick all the bureaucrats out, kick the for-profit prisons out. That'd be a great idea. End the drug war. Decriminalize anything that does not directly negatively impact another person's life, liberty, or property, or their pursuit of happiness in a roundabout way, should not be criminal at all. That's why simple possession, even public intoxication. I don't care if somebody staggers around drunk. If they're being disorderly, in the sense of, pissing others off, okay. But if somebody just wants to guzzle that beer and then walk around, as long as they're not bothering other people, who cares? It's a little bit like the idea of preemptive policing. Like, well, a crime may be committed here, so you're going to jail. It's basically what it boils down to with public intoxication, disorderly conduct after fashion. Certainly resisting arrest. You're resisting an unconstitutional attempt to incarcerate you for having done nothing wrong. Therefore, you're a criminal. Never fully made sense to me. There are a lot of things that probably shouldn't be criminal at all. Ultimately, half the lawyers in the country shouldn't even have jobs. No offense to lawyers out there, not that you're not doing your job, you're not a fun person. Some of you, I'm sure, are okay, but there shouldn't be as many people to defend against so many lawsuits and so many criminal cases, because there shouldn't be so many laws to enforce. There shouldn't be half as many cops in the country. Some of you shouldn't have jobs. Again, not because you're a bad person or there's something wrong with you. The state has created a situation in which an excessive police force is needed because there's so much to enforce. What you should be doing is you should be focusing on taking down that murderer that's fleeing. You should be finding the rapist. You should be finding the dude who puts on a trench coat and flashes people, the creepy dude who should be in a psych ward. Those are the people that you should be focused on. Instead, what do you end up doing? You have to drive around through the neighborhood to make sure nobody's doing a simple drug deal. So you can, bust someone for $50 worth of crack or something, inner city police force. Or some stupid, or somebody who's just drunk in public. These laws shouldn't even be enforced. It doesn't matter. You should have society in which for-profit prisons don't exist, you'd have more respect for the police forces. You'd have a lot fewer deaths of police. If they didn't have to kick down a door at 3 a.m. because someone smelled pot, then there'd be a lot less casualties among your, especially your inner city police forces. Then we could go back to the nifty 50s where it was seen as, oh, Andy Griffith and shit like that. We could be like that if we wanted to as a society. We haven't come too far. There's no cancerous corruption within society that prevents that from happening. There are other first world societies that fundamentally function in that capacity. Of course, they are socialist, so we'll leave that part behind. They're socialist and disarmed. But as far as criminal justice goes, divorcing it from the other context, yeah, we can reform that system. Half the people in jail today shouldn't even be there. That costs a lot of money. You know, people like me, we have to pay for that. So, yeah, the conservatives fucking get a move on. But here's the funny part. Here's one thing I wanted to say. It's interesting that AOC would bring up the specter of criminal justice reform, because the only person that's actually seriously implemented that has been Donald Trump. Supposedly a racist, supposedly evil dude. He hates the poor. He hates black people. No, he's the one who's trying to free people up on from federal incarceration and their criminal record to get them rehabilitated. He was the pioneer of some of the legislative materials that have gone forward in the last year. And obviously the legislature has to introduce it. He was the one who started that conversation of criminal justice reform, I think specifically for simple possession and minor things like that to get them out of the federal prison system. Now, it's a lot of people that have been able to rebuild their lives in the wake of that. Even people convicted of violent crimes, some crime of passion. Oh, yeah, I punched the dude in the bar, but he was calling my mother fat or something. Okay, well, that person's not necessarily an out-of-control, evil, corrupted, permanently disabled individual who needs to be taken out of society. Sometimes people make dumb mistakes. And everyone has a family and friends who will vouch for them in such a situation. Oh, no, they're not like that. They just got pushed too far or something. Yeah, I can accept that. Better than asking me to pay a bunch of money and some cop to endanger their lives to try to crack down on them because they sold Rolly cigarettes on the street or something, some Garner deal or something. Oh my God, they had a firearm and it wasn't registered properly with the right bureau, and so we smashed down their door at 2 a.m., dragged them and their wife screaming out of their bedroom by their hair and terrorized them. No, it's totally illegitimate. We need a second enlightenment is what we need with regards to the criminal and penal system. That's about all. Peace out.